Yay, first victory of the day here. Hello to everyone and apologies for starting 15 minutes late. You may have heard the recording in process and that means that Zoom, we finally got the host code that we needed in order to control the Zoom link here locally in the town center. And record this for people who want to see what we're up to after the fact. So we thought that was important and worth waiting for. So thank you for your patience. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 4:15 p.m. And thank you all for being here. We'll do the roll call initially as is our practice. I'm certainly here. George Savage, Stephen Casani.
Here.
Ken Levine.
Present.
Chris Rittler is absent today. Michelle Takai.
Here.
William Urban.
Here.
Mark Wacer.
Here.
All right. So we have 6 of the 7 of us today. That's really good. I will now ask for any oral communications from members of the public for items not on the agenda. I do not see any hands, but who knows? Given how IT is working today, let's just wait a few seconds. Okay, I don't see anything on item 2, so we'll move on. Announcements and presentations is item 3. We don't have any. We'll move to approval of the minutes, and we have the minutes from our last meeting, February 18th, 2025, to look at, but we also have the corrected minutes. We'll recall that we approved the minutes of January 28th, subject to a minor grammatical change, and I've have track changes on in that, so you should be able to review both of those. And so what I'd first like to ask is whether there's a motion to approve the February 18th minutes.
I'll move.
Okay, second.
I second.
Approve, in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. How about the corrected minutes? Do I have a motion to approve those as amended?
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, no one? All right. So we'll move on to our new business. We have a few things on the agenda today. A finance update, a review of the town council goals and priorities, which I understand is a work in process, and also budget calendar. We'll start with item A, which is the finance update. And we have some updated numbers in our packet, and I'll hand it off to Tony here to give all of us a review of how we're doing.
Great. Thank you, George. If I can share my screen. Yay. Take that out, that out. Okay, so is everybody seeing what's on the screen? Okay, so this is our finance update for the month ending January 31st. And starting with our cash in bank for the month ended 22.45 million was an increase of almost 51,000 from the previous month. Large part due to transferring funds from Bank of America to TechCU and moving about $1 million from Bank of America into TechCU. There's a money market account in there that's earning about 4.42%. So I took the money out of our general checking account, put it in the money market account. So that's kind of sitting in the money market account. It's completely liquid. We can transfer it instantaneously when needed. The plan is to keep the general checking account balance low and maximize interest earnings wherever possible. The balance in that account now is almost 1.8 million. As money keeps coming in from Bank of America, we transfer it over to TechCU. So we're just trying to maximize our interest earnings for the year. So net earnings from investments earned 101,000 for the month ended June January 31, 2025. And it's the net earnings from Schwab for the fiscal year earnings from interest and dividends of 511,000 plus market valuation of 34,000. The market value appreciation has been kind of fluctuating month to month, but January was a very good month and got the market value appreciation up into the black instead of the red. So all in all, I think investments are well placed, a good balance, and we seem to be riding the storm out a little bit. And so I'm kind of happy with our results so far with our interest earnings. You know, it's kind of volatile right now. Some of the numbers we're seeing about layoffs and stock market volatility, but I think we're okay with the way our Schwab portfolio is allocated. And I spoke with Bill just before the meeting, and we're going to have a standing meeting on a quarterly basis just to kind of review Schwab and just to see how our allocations are, and we'll do that on a regular basis. So looking at our cash balance by funds.
Hey, son.
I'm sorry, whoever was talking, can you mute, please? Thank you.
Looking at our cash balances by funds, general fund is about 2.2 million. Our restricted funds, which includes open space, Measure A, our inclusionary in lieu, those are the major funds of the restricted funds, is about 19.5 million, also including applicant deposits of 1.14. And then our fiduciary funds are our road maintenance district funds. We have about $710,000 in those funds. We are just the bank for the road maintenance districts. We have no say in what they do, other than the appropriateness of the expenses it's related to road maintenance. But we just collect the assessments and deposit it in these funds. And then the road maintenance districts alert us when they're spending money on road maintenance district or their road maintenance expenses.
Tony, quick question on this page with the restricted funds. The gas tax, so this is Fund 206, it's a small negative amount, but how can it be negative of 23,000?
So we were late with our gas tax annual filings. So we were spending, but we also receive SB1 money as well. But in February, we received about $270,000 of withheld gas tax monies because we're now current with our annual filings. So that negative will be a positive for February. Significant.
And this is presumably this is the tax from gasoline sold at the one gas.
The one gas
in town.
station, yes,
Town, all right, got
yes,
it, all right.
yes. So yeah, so in February, all our funds will have a positive cash balance. So then looking at the fund balances for each fund, general fund has a surplus of 108,000 through January. It's a positive result, primarily based on our vacancies that we're not spending as much on payroll. It's now catching up with the vacancies being out 2 to 3, 4 months now. Also, the use of consultants has been not exaggerated, so it's kind of kept costs at bay. The largest expense that we have between now and the rest of the fiscal year is our sheriff's second payment. That's about $880,000. That's going to be done in June. We're going to do that after we receive our major installment of property tax in April or May. So we're not going to have a negative impact on our cash flow. We'll still have a good cash balance before we make that payment. So overall, fund balance increased 1.28 million since the beginning of the fiscal year. That's all funds. The general fund balance at 2.01 million is a surplus of 100,000. And that concludes my finance update for January.
Okay, great. Just a clarifying question back on the original staff report, just to make sure I've got that right. Down where it says interest earnings and where it says Jan 25, that means the fiscal year through Jan 25. Is that
Yes,
right?
I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. Just making sure that everyone understands that. And then we have July through December next to that.
Question, do we as a town or as a committee have a policy on cash balances in excess of FDIC insured limits?
That's what I'm trying to keep. We don't have a policy per se, other than it's anything above 250,000 is not insured. That's on our checking account. However, the warrant lists do exceed $250,000 for the last 2 to 3. So we're gonna have to go above that amount just to cover those checks. Plus also keeping a balance in there for any outstanding checks as well. So I do try to keep it around 250, but I also have to look at what's coming out with our warrant lists.
And the funds in Tech CU, are those also covered by FDIC insurance?
Well, the money market account is whatever the balance is. But like the checking account has the 250,000 and the other account has about $150 in it. So I'm not even that one. That one earns like 1 basis point.
So Tony, I have are you through? Thank you. I have a question. Can you just explain, this is January 31st balances, right?
Yes.
And it's now, the end of March.
Mhm.
Can you explain why we couldn't have gotten February, end of February numbers? What's the process that,
Well, I
makes that
can, I'll have February for the next meeting. I just didn't have time. I mean, we had council meeting on Wednesday, finance committee meeting today, and then I got a budget study session on Monday. And also I had to make sure that we were completely done with our February postings, which we are, but I just didn't have time to have it done for the deadline for this meeting.
okay, so is it your intention to provide this sort of data at every month and you make it available or?
I can, well, depends on if the finance committee wants to meet every month. I can have a finance update. So if it's, say, the next meeting's in 2 months, then I will provide February and March or the April meeting or May. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some timing differences. I want to make sure we have everything posted. And then go forward from there.
Right.
But I mean, I do have February numbers. I just didn't have them in time for this meeting.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're getting the postings done.
Yeah.
Seems like the numbers were there, you just didn't have time to
Right.
incorporate it into the report.
Can I
So-
jump in here? Because I think, just so we're clear with the public, at the end of each month, electronically, we can go into each of these accounts. You can, and you can see exactly what the value of the holdings are. I think there's a reconciliation that
Yes.
you want to do with the internal books, and you want to do that before you
Right.
present it. into a
I have to
financial
make sure
report.
that everything that's hit our bank statements is reflected in our ledger.
Yeah, and there may be some small anomalies from time to time, but.
If it's, if it's
generally-
not material, I'm not gonna worry about it. But if it's like a missing payment from, say, for gas tax, I want to make sure that they're posted before I create this report.
Okay, and I think the other thing that maybe you and I are going to talk about this more, there was a plan at some point to put maybe a slimmed down version, but with the essential elements of the money in the various accounts and the restricted funds and so forth on the website, town's website, so public can keep track.
Yeah.
Each month.
Yeah, we want to get to that. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
And it's just baby steps that we're getting to the point where we have good numbers now that I can create reports and get them out as far as, because part of the council priorities that we'll go into later is, for 24-25, this fiscal year was continued education on the town's finances. And this is part of that process.
So the second question I have is on the third page, you have the fund balances and you have the assigned general fund balances. Those balances of different items. Those aren't the original balances, as I recall, that we had.
Those are
Previously said.
prorated based on the original 5 million fund balance that we all thought we had.
Right.
So I just prorated those numbers to the revised fund balance number.
Okay.
So the number that's going to fluctuate from month to month is the unassigned number. That's where the net gain to this gain or loss to the general fund will be reflected in the unassigned numbers.
Okay. Yeah, and to some extent, we're not indicating that these aren't the numbers that we want them to be or set them to be at a previous meetings.
Right.
In previous years.
Mhm.
They're just a mathematical,
Right. Right, because
version.
we're gonna have to go through, because council's gonna have to review these and set the numbers. But I can say for certainty, the OPEB liability, we actually have a negative OPEB liability. The total OPEB liability is about $300,000. We have about $500,000 sitting in our trust, so I'm gonna have to have a conversation with them and say, we might need some of that back. Because we're gonna need it for something else. So, but that's gonna be updated with the 21-22 audit.
Okay.
And when do we think that audit will be ready?
I'm going to try and get it in as soon as I can. I've now got multiple priorities, so
No,
But
but
it's-
just an expectation of
I,
a month, 2
I-
months, 3 months.
I'm gonna try for May.
Okay.
If not, it'll be June.
Just to clarify, that's for the 21-22.
That's 21-22, yeah.
And then with regard to 22-23 and 23-24, a couple of months ago, the minutes indicated that still the auditors were scheduled to complete them by the end of August 2025. Do you think that still holds, or has that been pushed back also?
24-25 will probably be pushed back. 23-24 might as well. 22-23 might be done by August. Part of the issue was with 21-22, we're doing a restatement. And by doing the restatement, it increased the scope of review. So they've asked for significantly more items to review because of this prior period adjustment.
We're doing a restatement
Of
of
the 2021,
of 21-22,
of 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Did we talk about that?
No, that's
No.
just it's been coming up through this audit, but yeah, there were, our liability balances were overstated. And again, it's based on accounting entries that I discovered while I was going through my 21-22 review. I think I did mention it in a prior meeting, but I just haven't gone into detail as to what it was.
You had mentioned that there was some ledger
Yes,
issues, yeah, that were done consistently, but
they were done consistently for several years, yeah,
Yeah.
and they were consistently incorrect.
And so, presumably then, therefore, the 2021 restatement, that in just the sequence, that will need to be done before 21-22.
No, it'll be reflected in the 21-22
It'll be reflected.
audited financial statements as a prior period adjustment.
Oh, okay. Oh, so, okay, it'll be a prior period. Okay, so then.
And
therefore, yes.
the reason I pushed on this is because it's to our favor. So it actually increases our fund balance in general fund. But I don't want to go
The-
accounting 101 and everything.
The general fund balance.
The general
The
fund.
general fund balance.
well, it is really great to have numbers next to all of our fund balances that you have confidence in, so that's a win.
I tried to do a quick calculation just to see where we are on our cash reserve policy. So I think we could do that from your numbers here. The way we normally calculate that, I believe, is, excuse me, we take the general fund unrestricted cash balance that excludes all the money in the restricted funds. I think it also excludes what you're calling the fiduciary funds. And that number you show in your report as about a little over 2.2 million. And then we would divide that by the full year budgeted expenditure number, which isn't on this report, but I think it's around 7.5.
7.5 million.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so that math gets us to about 30%. Does that
Approximately.
sound about right?
Mhm.
Okay, and that's below our policy
That
of
is below
60%.
60%,
But I
yeah.
think it's higher than it was some months ago. Didn't we
Yes.
measure it at around 25 or 26% at some point?
Mhm.
Okay, and we also said that at some point, and maybe in a future meeting, maybe we'd have a reserve policy discussion here
Correct.
on the council. We haven't adjusted our reserve policy for 10 years. We
Right.
were always well above it. We're underneath it. We're going to be underneath it for a while. And we wanted to revisit that. So we said what the expectation is, what happens or what doesn't happen if we're
I would
below
like to
reserve
visit
policy.
that for 25, 26, the
Yeah.
next budget, that
Okay.
we have that conversation. And then we actually put it in the budget.
Right, thanks.
Any more comments up here? Questions before I open it to the public?
Stop sharing.
Okay, oh, and yeah, try to turn the camera on so that it's on the dais here. I think the only video of us, anyone's getting is of me because I have my laptop camera on. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Any comments, questions from the public? Okay, nobody with a hand raised in the room or online. Anything more from the committee here before we move on? Okay, we will move on to the review of town council goals and priorities. Again, I'll ask Tony to kick us off here on this.
And so last night, the council did go over, they reviewed their goals and priorities for 24, 25 and kind of established which ones are going to be priority for, and also kind of give direction to our interim town manager, what can be done by June, what can be done by the end of December. First and foremost, finances are the number one priority. But other items to consider is if we do pursue a revenue measure for November 2026, we have to kind of develop timeline to get everything ready by July of 2026. The deadline is August, but depending on how many meetings we have in July, the last meeting in July will be our last opportunity to basically finalize all the paperwork needed if we wanted to put a revenue measure on the ballot for November 2026. Depending on the revenue measure, we'll have to start immediately after basically the budget gets adopted, July, August, or September, to have any type of committee set up, or depending on which, if it's a charter town or if it's partial tax, or but to get the legwork done, to get everything ready. So that's going to be something we're going to have to focus on, anticipating involvement and commitment from the finance committee to meet these goals. But obviously for finance, it's, yes, we're going to continue completing our audits. We're going to continue educating the town on our finances. But it's still an ongoing goal and priority. And council made it pretty clear last night that finances are very important. And so we'll be taking a lead role in this as well. But the other items that were discussed were efficiency, organizational efficiencies, and land use, or safety. Yeah. So, but for this committee, it's finance. So, so that was a review of the priorities that they did last night, and hopefully ratifying those goals and priorities at the next council meeting on April 9th.
And we're, service levels, that part of that discussion? in
That's
terms
part of the organizational efficiencies conversation.
Yeah.
And that'll be brought up and bubbling up during this development of the 25-26 budget as well.
Okay. And any, do we have any further insights into what may happen with the sheriff's contract, given the election? and all
It's
that?
still in limbo right now, as long as
Yeah.
she's still sheriff, so, but I mean, I think we've set ourselves up well that if there is a change that we can still be, because we didn't pass any type of no confidence, measure against her, that we can come back to the sheriff and say, hey, we stayed out of the fray, but, we still need to have a conversation about, where we're going with the contract.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a wait and see game. That's what's going on with the county. There's a lot of claims right now. Everybody seems to be suing everybody.
The American way. Yeah. More comments, questions here?
Was there any discussion at the town council meeting with regarding priorities for the upcoming budget for the 2026 year of having a balanced budget?
That is to be determined based on the outcome of the April 9th meeting, because what council decides or settles on for goals and priorities is going to develop the budget of what we need and what we can afford. But we still need direction from the council on the goals and priorities to start that process. But that will be part of the conversation that we'll be having.
George, in terms of making a motion at some point, I'd like to raise the topic of having the finance committee make a recommendation to the town council that we have a balanced budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
Sure, okay. I think the way we'll do this is, let's all ask questions. We'll go to the public here on this, then we'll come back. And if you want to discuss a motion, we can do that. Any more questions, clarifying questions here on this item before I open it to the public? All right. Looking at my board here, I see Rita, you have your hand up. Rita, please talk to us.
Hi, hopefully this works because I'm driving, but my question is, if we do put together some type of measure to go to the election, with the current staff being so limited and us restricting contractors, how much is this going to cost us? And how are we realistically going to do this when there's so much that we haven't yet accomplished just for our day-to-day financial responsibilities over the past couple of years? Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Other comments online? And we're kind of empty here in the room, so I'm not ignoring people in the room either. Okay. Thank you.
I can.
Yeah, please.
By doing the election on November 2026, it's a statewide election, so it's going to be a lower cost significantly than if we were to do a special election. The numbers, I can tell you the numbers are, but if we had done the special election in March, we were looking at a 6-figure cost.
Right.
But when it's a general election statewide, the costs are reduced because there's going to be a lot more ballot measures or a lot more measures on the ballot, that the costs will be split.
Yeah, my sense is that the cost should be pretty minimal apart from legal work, drafting, whatever it is the town council wants to
Yeah.
do.
And some of that stuff's already been started, so it's ongoing as part of what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Mark, you wanted to talk about a motion for a balanced budget?
That was it. I'd like to make a motion that the finance committee recommend
Okay.
to the town council that the budget for the fiscal year ending June 2026 be balanced
Okay.
as a priority.
Right, discussion on that? Does
Um,
everybody think?
That's not on the agenda.
Okay, so we can't.
Can't
that?
discuss it.
All right, how about we consider that at the next
Yeah, that's something that'll need to be agendized.
Okay.
And yes, the finance committee will be asked to weigh in and make recommendations on the budgets for 25, 26, but that's not today.
And because we're going to put that on next time or when, one of our upcoming, but let's put the reserve policy on there because the two are inextricably linked.
Yeah, that's good.
George, forgive my ignorance, just procedurally, how do we put topics on the agenda?
Well, I think we bring it up here and then we agree that I'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting. And that way, everybody has notice, say, I think the goal of the law on this is that if somebody's interested in the topic, they get notice, the topic will be discussed and they can participate.
And like, we could not take action tonight because it's not on the agenda for action, so.
So we mentioned that everybody here has agreed that we should talk about that and we should talk about it with the reserve policy. So I have a note, it should be in our minutes, that we wanted our next meeting to have on the agenda, a joint discussion of budget recommendation in terms of balance and then reserve policy.
It does call in question the sequencing topic, because if the next town council meeting is April 9th, for which they will be ratifying priorities, that they will be doing so without any input from the finance committee.
Yeah, but these are town council priorities in terms of the kind of things they want to focus on, or they're not adopting the budget at that point.
Also, the town council, the budget that we're operating under right now, there was a lot of recommendations from the finance committee that were taken into account. And that's carrying over into 25, 26. So finance committee's recommendations or suggestions are still being built into what we're doing. But yes, as we go through the budget process, we're starting a brand new budget. That yes, finance committee has already done a lot of legwork on items that will be discussed. But a formal recommendation will be coming forth during the budget process.
So before the original budget was adopted and the revised budget was adopted, the finance committee never made a recommendation, a formal recommendation. We discussed it, but we never actually recommended anything.
Correct, but what was recommended was put into the budget.
Yeah, and I should just notice that despite me now having a gavel here, which has appeared, which is kind of fun, and we have nameplates and it's getting more formal, we're fortunate in that even given the informal nature of the committee, where it used to be very informal, we have a lot of participation from town council members. So one's here in the room, at least one's online listening as a member of the audience. And so, we have a formal liaison and a lot of the members pay attention to what we're saying. So they tend to react to the discussion here, which is good. Yeah, and our mayor would like to speak to us, so. Mayor.
Before you do, I'd like to add one more comment here, and that is much more important than the ratio that we use for our policy setting is the service levels and how we need some kind of information from town staff, from somebody, to tell whether or not this budget we had this year, which is balanced budget, which also has decreased services to it and decreased capital spending, whether or not that's something that we want to do in the following year. And so we need some information on that. It's nice to be able to say, I want a balanced budget, or I want one with minus X dollars or plus X dollars. I'd like to know something about the service levels and the whether or not town members of the town are feeling, how they feel.
So just for context, April 9th is when we're going to ratify the priorities that we agreed on last night. There has to be a recordation of the different modifications to existing priorities that were made last night. We're going to get that on April 9th, but they're pretty high level. So I don't want you to feel like you have to make a formal recommendation before then. We're not, the priorities are to help the interim town manager allocate staff time and understand when to flag for us that trade-offs have to be made among priorities. So it's really a different purpose. I would look to Tony to make sure he's communicating when, you know, or it's gonna be on the town website anyway, when we're actually gonna be getting into budget discussions at a certain level. I don't know when you next meet, so one possibility is to put that on the agenda and discuss it when you next meet. But there's always like my notes. And certainly you're not going to go unheard. But should you want to do something more formal, you have time. I don't want you to feel like now's the moment and you didn't agendize it in time. You have time. And we'll be listening. And even, George will probably have the opportunity to consult with Tony and Mark as well, just to convey any sensitivities that might be missed. So I just don't want you to think it has to work that formal and you're missing a window. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, so what I took out of that is that at our next meeting, we will discuss our budget recommendations, reserve recommendations. And to Ken's point, one of the things that we want to pay attention to the town council for as they get into their priorities is this question of service levels. And that's going to be a discussion, I think, for the whole next year for the town as we consider a revenue measure, because it's up to the taxpayers as a group to decide what service level they want versus what tax level and how they want taxes raised in what form. Because as was pointed out, we have a balanced budget, which is great. So we were in a financial hole and we are now stable, but we're stable with reduced services. And what's the right long-term goal?
Can I recommend that the recommendations go in May? Because there's going to be a lot of information going between, and we'll go over that in the next item, but actually I'll make this comment at the next, when we go to the next item.
Yeah, when we get to the next item, we can discuss budget calendar and in that context, our calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are we ready to go on to the next item? Okay, we're there. Budget calendar.
Well, the budget calendar, let me share my screen. So, looking at the budget calendar online there, March 26th, last night, council priorities were reviewed. The first budget study session is this Monday. We'll be going over revenues, and just revenues. So we're going to talk about all the different revenues that the town receives, how they're received, when they're received, how do I get the numbers for these? So for example, property tax, get the numbers from the assessor's office, their estimates. Sales tax, what makes up sales tax? How much does the town get from sales tax? What funds are funded through sales tax? So it's basically revenue 101. So that'll be the first session. Then April 24th, we're gonna have a town hall for the community. And it'll be basically a revenue 101 from what we discussed with council. On April 30th is the budget study session for expenses. This is where we're going to get more into service levels, and because by then we'll have the council priorities ratified, so we'll be able to say, okay, for service levels, we need this or we need that, and kind of adjust and see how much it's actually going to cost us to provide the service levels that are needed. And if we have a balanced budget, then this is what we're going to be sacrificing. So that will be the meatier part of the budget study session, of the study sessions will be the expense side. May 7th, there's going to be another town hall on expenses. Again, this will be an opportunity for the residents to ask questions, comment, provide feedback. May 14th, we're going to have a capital improvement plan session. And if we can squeeze out any dollars to make some capital improvements, we'll go over that process. We do have a list of projects that were deferred, but we'll probably go into more detail on what these projects are, what's funding them, what timelines are going to be. And that'll give council a time to weigh in and provide direction. May 28th, we're going to review the town committee requested budgets and nonprofit funding. We do those on an annual basis. And then June 11th, we're hoping to adopt the budget. But so for the next 2.5, 3 months, it's going to be all budget. And there's going to be many opportunities for the finance committee to weigh in. Also, there'll be an opportunity for finance committee to review the items that I'll be bringing forth to the council, just to give me your buy-in. And then the last item is the fee schedule. We're parsing it. We're doing the fee study first, hopefully to have that completed for the May 28th meeting or June 11th. And then the Nexus study we will do post adoption of the budget. They're just not going to be able to put both of them together by May or June. So that's the budget calendar as proposed. And I yield back to the committee for questions.
This is not a question, but it's a comment that I think this is actually very, very well done in terms of the sequencing and what topics it covers. While I've been on the committee for less than a year, I did, in preparation for joining the committee, did go back into time as best I could to see what had been done for the budgeting process leading up to the actual adoption budget. So from what I can gather, this is a marked improvement from what has been done in the past. The other thing that I did to try to educate myself as to how this whole civic process works in the local level, I took a look at all of the finance information for all of our surrounding towns. And in my opinion, the town that I think puts forward and describes the budgeting process the best that's a neighbor to the south is Los Altos Hills. If anyone is interested, it's right on their website. The Los Altos Hills has a very good budget process. I think this is equally as good, and frankly, it's more tailored and better suited for us than the longer process that Los Altos Hills done. So I just wanted to have those two comments, and actually so commend you for having put this together. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage finance committee members to attend either online or in person as much of this as you can. I'm certainly going to do that.
I'm sorry, so when would you want committee input?
Well, we'll have to establish when the meetings are, but I would like to have a committee recommendation for May.
And what May is a big timeline. So when, let's try to ballpark without consulting calendars, when would input from us be most helpful to you, either in 1 or 2 meetings in this process?
When?
Yeah,
I
when
get
in
that.
the sequence of events here, as you point out, there are input, right, from the council and study sessions with council, and then solicitation in a more formal way through town halls of input as well as education of the general public. And then we will have some input, and we'll also have an audit to look
Right.
at and stuff like that. And when would be good timing for that? In the
So
midst?
in April, we can, go over the revenue assumptions.
Mhm.
And then in May, on the expense side.
Okay,
And then-
so 2 meetings, 1 in April, 1 in May. Does that work for members here?
So this would be after the town hall in April or before?
It could be before the town hall. Actually, no, let's make it after the town hall.
Do we do one meeting, do both revenues and expenses? Do we need to?
But that'll be a long meeting. I'm being cognizant of our time. Doing revenues and expenses in one meeting would.
So when would you come up with the timeline for revenue enhancement? Or is that something soon?
Well, that would be part of when we get to the I'm thinking the May meeting, when we're doing town committees and nonprofit funding, we may also have direction from council on what, if there is going to be revenue enhancement measures. And we'll have an idea by then, so then that'll be put in the budget. But we'll have a, if we get that direction in May, then we can start building or we're gonna have the timelines in place for council discussion.
In May? So that'll give us a little over a year to
Yes.
July.
Yes.
So would a meeting the last week of April and then in the middle of May, does that work?
Yes.
Okay, so this would probably be meetings 2, maybe 3 weeks apart. And we can take this offline to figure out what works for everyone.
Yeah.
All right, looks like a plan. We're gonna have a lot of stuff to chew on here soon.
And can I also make one more recommendation? And this goes to Mark's point about putting items on the agenda, maybe have an item on the agenda for future topics.
Yeah.
And at that point, the committee member can say, I want to have a conversation about this, or a conversation about that. And then that way it's noted during the meeting.
So it's the topic of future topics is discussed,
Yes,
not substantively, but for agendizing at the next.
right.
meeting.
Yeah, I would like to see this agenda.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a great idea.
So these study sessions are meant to be for the public as well, or just the council?
The budget study sessions for the council, but they will be recorded. And there will be opportunity for public comment. The town hall is the residents. I think council members can observe. And then, committee members, yes, you are residents, so yes, you'll have the opportunity to. And I would encourage the residents to come and engage, because that's what I'm here to do, is answer questions and educate the town on our town finances, which is one of the council's strategic goals. But I would like to encourage the residents to take part of the town hall sessions.
Yeah, I agree with that. So,
Because I mean, that's also going to be an opportunity to give us feedback on are our service levels working or not.
yeah, that's great. So we should all take pains to, if you can't attend live in one venue or another, skim through the recordings. And we'll all here on the committee become familiar with what the public is saying and the town council members are saying as well. Okay, if nothing else from up here, any comments, questions from the public here online? Do not see any hands up there right now, so this seems pretty uncontroversial. I just want to add my praise to Mark's, Tony, that this is very organized and can't wait to go through all this to not only learn more about it, because it's revenues particularly and the way they're allocated amongst entities in the state is always extremely labyrinthine and confusing for me. So every time I have it explained, I think I understand it, but 3 hours later, I can't remember the details. So I can't wait to hear that again. And then as we discuss expenses and capital improvement and all these other items, that then feeds into the service level, how many staff does the town want to fund, and then how do we fund it? That's very good. Okay. I think we may have exhausted the agenda at this point. Is there more comments from up here before we move to other business and adjournment? Okay, hearing nothing, any other business? Seeing nothing there, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Okay, second? In favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned at 5:05.